this moment. You're here, you're right here, and you're ready to fight.
So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whenever you're listening to this. This is Macho Media alongside my critical partner in crime, Ricardo Medina.
Yo, we're here.
And it's a wrap. Anytime of us recording this, it is Star Wars Day, right? Which is the holiday that all the Star Wars fans wanted. And, you know, great-great-grandfather George Lucas was like, all right, cool, they want a holiday? All right, cool. Yeah, May the 4th is, a holiday, right? So yes, at the time of us recording this, it is Star Wars Day, right? And, because of that, we will be talking about Andor. Well, the first half of Andor, right? Because, we got the first 6 episodes over the course of 2 weeks because, Disney Plus and Lucasfilm so dread, but they just dropping 3 episodes a week, right? And
the way it is that this is, for understand, this is the last season.
It is, yes. And the way how it's structured, it makes sense why it's like that.
Each 3 episode run is like a season on its own because they're doing they're doing big time skips in between, which is interesting. It's like, okay, they do like a jump from since the end of last season, then they jump after episode 3. Like, okay, that's interesting. So that's fascinating what they're doing with that. So it looks like they just jumping through time, and it's 2 more left now. So it's like 2 more 3 episode runs, and it'll lead straight into Rogue One, which is like, cool.
All right, but in this case, we will not be doing this review of Andor Season 2 alone. So let's welcome to It's a Wrap officially Tracy Hutchins.
Sigrona Tima, everyone. Sigrona Tima.
Yes, Sigrona Tima. I see what you did there. Right? Yes. So, yes, Tracy, welcome to the It's a Wrap rebrand, right? So, officially, yes, welcome, right?
It is.
But yeah,
to be here, man. It's awesome.
Yes. You're welcome. So yes, on this auspicious day called Star Wars Day, and I know by the time this review comes out, it will not be Star Wars Day, but whatever. Let's go. Yes, let's talk about the awesomeness.
Here's a very quick thing. Here's a very quick thing. People like me are gonna celebrate the whole month because you have Star Wars Day, which is the 4th. You have Revenge of the 5th, which is the day out, the 5th of May. And then, given the fact that the original episode, New Hope, came out on the 25th of May, that requires one to celebrate for the entire month of May. And then there's talk about a re-release of Empire Strikes Back, which may also fall in May as well. So we don't know, May, June. So we will be eating for quite some time. But yes.
Right. Yes, I have to remember that, the Empire Strikes Back is turning 45 this month. I have to remember that. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Right. So, Andor, Ricardo and I, we sung our praises of it when the first season dropped, a couple of years ago. And the moment we saw that first trailer for season 2, it's like, all right, cool. Yeah, we're ready. I didn't need to say anything else. It was like, all right, Andor season 2, we are there, right? So, just quick preamble, right? So, for one thing, right? I imagine saying it with you, Tracy. We were both surprised. Ricardo and I was surprised, right? At just how just the level of storytelling that was put into that first season of Andor, right? Basically saying that here's what, right? While it is okay to enjoy the action adventure aspect of the franchise, right? Which we've been enjoying since A New Hope even dropped, right? In this case, we're gonna give you this sort of war espionage thriller drama, but it's all about the early beginnings of the Resistance, or I should say the Resistance leading up to the point of, Rogue One, right? Which, this show is a spin-off of, right? So, and I love that, just slight spoiler, I was going to say this near the end, right? I like that, I think Diego Luna himself see this, right? Yeah, once this new season ends, rewatch Rogue One, because you're going to see Rogue One in a different light. And I'm going to do just that. I'll say this right now, folks, as God has been witness here. Yes, expect a re-review of Rogue One the moment Andor season 2 ends. I have to do it. We have to do it, right? I feel, right, like if I rewatch Rogue One after watching this season here, I'm going to love it. Because, yes, admittedly, Rogue One is not one of my all-time favorite Star Wars films, right? I
I
enjoy
love
it for what it is. I
it.
do like that it does take its material seriously, like way seriously, right? But it was
Yeah.
not a show that I absolutely love, right? I still have
Oh no, I'm on
issues
the
with
other side.
the yeah, I still have issues with the deep fake characters, especially that they had to end it with Leia.
Right.
Still they had to edit. I don't know, right? But
It's
you know,
interesting. Here's the thing for me. It's interesting that you say that because I mean, we may not necessarily talk about it now, but given the tiny little thing that they did, which turned out to be a very big thing that they did in the second arc of this season two, it does open up a way now where we don't have to be bound to the uncanny valley anymore, and that
Right.
is a major milestone for Star Wars moving forward if they decide to continue on with that. But I understood why you had to have like Leia and even Tarkin there because it's supposed to lead when Gareth was directing it, it was leading directly into um like about a few hours before the
Episode
events
1, yeah.
of A
Yeah.
New Hope.
Right.
So so you're gonna have to now deal with okay, how do we bring in a layer into it, which everybody already screams like we'll never recast Leia because she had not too long died and we weren't going to go through all of this scene and everything of the sort. But that I think what they've done now with Andor, whether we talk about it here or otherwise, it opens up a whole new world now of okay, we can do this without the uncanny valley.
yeah, exactly. So let's wrap it up here, the preamble, right? But yeah, that season
Mhm.
one just surprised the hell out of me, right? For one thing, just how grounded it felt. It felt realistic in quotes, right? By Star Wars standards, right? I love that it took its material seriously, and to the point that yes, you genuinely cared about what was going on, right? It wasn't like, oh, goofy force stuff and lightsaber stuff. No, it's about the Empire is bad, like really bad, right? I love that, yes, there were other films that touched on this before, right? But in this case, it just felt so grounded, felt real, right? Again, like it really feels like you're watching a war film, right? Or a war drama, like something that took place, like, in World War II, right? So, yes, if the whole, comparisons to Nazis when it comes to Empire, was on the nose, in this case, like, yes, we are going to make it clear that, yeah, these people are Nazis, right? They move just like Nazis, right? Right down to going into people's house and interrogating them. That's how dread they are, right? But then you have this unlikely hero in the form of Cassian Andor, right? Played by Diego Luna, who kind of gets roped into this, right? I love that in the first season, which I was glad to recap, right? This is where he sort of understands, this is what resistance means to me, right? Because this is where we have the anti-hero, I had to call him an anti-hero at this point, of Luton, right? Played by Stellan Skarsgård, pretty much kind of telling him, look, what does resistance mean to you, right? And you really see that through all of these characters, right? Yeah, what is Mon Mothma or Bix or whatever it is, yeah, what does resistance mean to you? What does taking down the Empire means to you, and how far are you willing to go? Are you going to put your whole life at risk? Are you going to what if you lose a loved one, right, or whatever it is? What are you willing to sacrifice to ensure that this giant, I don't want to say corporation, but let me just say this giant war machine is brought down, right? You really see that in this film here, right? Sorry, in this first season here, right? But I'll bring this up too in my review. I could understand some people, especially those who casually watch Star Wars for just the visuals and the action and the adventure, all that kind of stuff, kind of watch this and say, yeah, it's kind of boring, kind of a drag, kind of dull, kind of dour. It is very somber. I will say that it is very somber, right? And appropriately so, right? But I never really
Yeah.
found it to be boring. It is a slow burn. It is, right? And I would say that if you are the patient type, you will be rewarded in more ways than one, right? Because there's so much bits of dialogue and character actions and interactions in particular that pay off brilliantly throughout when the season progresses, right? I would say that. And yeah, just recapping the first season, I was like, wow, but like these moments still hold up. Like this, it's just great, right? But the concern though, even though we are in now that we've reached the first half of the season here, right, is that yeah, this is the final season, right? So is it now going to be a case whether they're just going to take all the ideas that they would have expanded on, and is just gonna crunch them into this one show, or is it that
Right.
just the creators themselves already knew the true line, already knew what it is was gonna tell, and just gonna end the season off brilliantly, and then we could all jump into Rogue One and be like, "Yep, Rogue One is a masterpiece." I guess you'll see in due time, right? But for this review, we will be talking about the first 6 episodes, i.e., the first half of the second season, right? So, Tracy, if you don't mind, I want you to do the synopsis for the first half here. But Ricardo and I, we already like praised, the first season of Andor already. Yeah, you mind just sharing your brief thoughts on the first season before you jump into this one here?
My thoughts are pretty much like this. There's a reason why there's a wars in Star Wars. And as much as we get caught up in the whole rapture of, getting wherever we need to get to in 12 parsecs or less, and the space wizards doing space wizardry, it is still a war. And one of the things that I absolutely loved about like season 1 of Andor is that it actually drove into the idea of what it means to live in a war-torn galaxy. What does it mean to have the Empire's flags? There's something that Saw Gerrera says in Rogue One when he says to Jyn, can you stand, seeing the Empire's flags hang high over, over the galaxy? Something along those lines. And now you get to see exactly all these characters, some of whom you know and some of whom is brand new, how they actually live in that. So, like at the end of the first season of Andor, with the whole Rick's Road and the Daughters
Right.
of Ferrix, those 2 episodes at the end where Marva, spoiler, Marva dies, and they have the funeral, and Ferrix now wakes up and decides to be revolutionary. It just propels you even more to be like, this is the wars in Star Wars. And so that for me is legitimately like my attraction to it. But I would also just, casually say, not for nothing, but I will casually say, as much as I love what Tony Gilroy is doing, I want to just make very quick, shout outs and props to Gareth Edwards. Because Gareth Edwards, was the original director for Rogue One and like had the ideas put together. And somewhere along the lines, Gareth and Lucasfilm didn't, the vision didn't coalesce. And even though he's still credited as director, Tony comes in and does what he has to do. I think Tony was the one who decided to do the Darth Vader scene at the end of Rogue One, and that becomes a thing. So now we have Andor, which is more or less a deep dive into Tony's mind, into how he sees Star Wars and how he deals with the wars of itself, which is brilliant. But massive props to Gareth for at least giving the route that we're all on now. So that's my thoughts on season 1 and all of that. For season 2, what I'm loving in terms of season 2 is that it is broken into different arcs. So each 3 episodes, they drop 3 episodes, and then they're going to drop another 3 episodes and drop another 3 episodes. But each arc symbolizes a year before the Battle of Yavin, or as we would call it, BBY. So
Right.
each year brings us closer to the Battle of Yavin, which means it brings us closer to the events of Rogue One. Whereas Andor season 1 set up Cassian's Cassian in terms of whether he decides to take this seriously, and moving from him just being a one-man show. Season 2, you actually get to see a little bit more of what it means to be part of a rebellion. You get to see the noose, for want of a better way of putting it, you get to see the noose being tied on the galaxy and what that does to the people in the galaxy and the people who are involved. Because there will come a time when Mon Mothma has to flee the Senate, like literally run for her life. So now you're getting to see how those events are going to shape itself up. You're also getting to see very uniquely, which is something we don't oftentimes get to see in live action Star Wars, because you will get these things in books and like little games and stuff like that. What it means to be an agent of the Empire, because in season 2 you get both sides.
Yeah.
So you have the rebellion being built, and all the scrappiness and everything of that. But then you have through the eyes of characters like Dedra Miro and Cyril, which is the most uncomfortable couple in the world, but
Right.
Dedra and Cyril, and Partagaz, which is her boss. All these people, how they, from the Empire's perspective, how they believe in it, what they believe in it. Even, we will talk about it later on, but even like the idea there is a propaganda ministry there, and how people, how the people inside there reacted. And as someone who's involved in marketing, I was just watching that and I was like, oh my God. So
Yeah.
season 2 really does give you like, it takes you into the mind of both sides of it. This is what the people who are going to be forming this rebellion, what they feel like, and this is the Empire, which you very rarely get to see. Most of the times when you watch Star Wars, the people in the Empire is basically cannon fodder. But you have like books, like Tarkin has his book, and there's a whole series there on this admiral who's coming back in Ahsoka. I can't remember his name right now for the life of me. Forgive me, Star
Tron.
Wars fandom. Ron,
Tron.
and
Yeah.
you get to see Ron, and you get to see how they're built. Even and this is on a side, but there's even books on like Phasma, and there's this one book that was called Lost Stars, which was a kind of Romeo and Juliet type story of a girl who joins the Empire, and her love of her life who joins the rebellion, and what that does to them during the events leading up to Star Wars. So for Andor season 2 to actually show more of that and show the different people involved in it and what that does to them, yeah, it's hit something very watchable. Let's put it that way.
Right. So, we might as well just share our individual thoughts on on the show, on this season so far, right? And yeah, just a little warning, there may be some spoilers here or there, right? So yeah, Ricardo, kick things off. Sorry. Yeah, what do you think about the first half of Andor season 2 so far?
Yeah, it's a lot more slow and more methodical than season 1. Season 1, it's a lot less action. Like so far, it didn't really have any set pieces in this to speak of. It had one very controversial thing in episode 3, which for this show it makes some
Yeah.
sense doing that. I don't have a big problem with this, but
Yeah.
I could see
Neither me,
people.
neither me.
A couple people on the internet was having a meltdown over this. I didn't have an
Oh,
issue with it, but you
Star
can get
Wars went too far with this. I like,
right, and it's for kids,
It is
and
necessary
I
though.
understand. I kind of understand at least the premise of the argument, even though the people making it is not usually the bad faith types, so is whatever. But I thought it's so far it's more about the emotions and the facts that everybody kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of losing their will a little bit. Like they're starting to make mistakes, they're starting to crack a little bit, and on multiple sides. Like what they're doing with like the stuff involving Cyril and Deidre is so dark and insidious, because
boy.
it's
It is.
it starts off like in the first 3 episodes they do the whole thing with their relationship going on, and then Deja whipped the mother into shape, right? She locked down the mother one time and say, watch now, Diamond boy, you can't be fucking around again, you're done. Right? And she put the mother in she place. And
I've
then
never wanted to applaud more in my life watching that whole scene play out. It was just
yeah,
like, yeah.
but that part with Cyril on the bed was just cracking me up. I mean,
I know,
I just,
right? And
but
by the
no,
way,
like,
and the music, we'll talk about the music in a bit, eh? The music they
yeah,
play
and
in that
then
bit, but I was like, wow, but they really showed how much of a loser this man is. Like, wow.
yeah, and then the stuff with Bix in the second. Well, okay, so then Cyril, and then to find out what the real like reason why they're doing what they're doing is
Mhm.
pretty insidious business, but it makes perfect sense because it's to make a thing happen, a big engineering problem. They're solving an engineering problem, it's a really dark thing. I suppose we could just say spoilers. I suppose. Yeah, this planet. I forget the name of the planet with the spiders or whatever
Gorman.
it is. Gorman,
Yeah,
right? Gorman,
Gorman,
Gorman.
right?
Gorman.
Yeah. This planet, effectively, they're gonna just husk out this planet through the core, through this mining procedure. And yeah, the reason why they're on the planet have nothing to do with clothes, right?
Nope.
And they can't piece together why it is that they're going to Gorman. And then they started to make mistakes with respect to even my boy who's probably my favorite character in Star Wars, late Luton, he making mistakes because it's true an accident.
Mm.
But his personality and him clashing with Andor, that is good stuff. But then the accident where one of the art pieces is a fraud. So
Yeah.
now they had to
Forgery.
wipe the whole thing, but that they'll find the microphone. And like, oh shit, that is good stuff. And all that stuff is good tension stuff. There's no set pieces. It's all just tension, personality, tension, personality stuff. Like we get one thing with the in the beginning with the new TIE fighter, but which is all right moment. And yeah, it's good personalities bouncing off each other and them kind of cracking. Mon Mothma's arc is probably the strongest so far, I'll say, all things considered.
Agreed.
Because she
Indeed,
has,
yes, yes.
yes, one, well, you learn that she effectively sell out your daughter for nothing,
Yeah.
right? Because you find out, well, where the money come back from now. It's like, oh yeah, right, it's coming from the Empire anyway, so it don't matter. It's like all the money going back to the Empire. The stuff with Saw Gerrera is little but great. That part, that catch me. I didn't think Saw would do something like that. Like the part
Oh yeah, with
that,
him and that kid, I forgot his name, Will something,
Will.
Willman.
Will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
right, but like
that
what,
caught me by surprise. And while we'll
yeah,
say
what's
it's a
going on?
very effective way to end that episode, but I was like, wow,
Yeah,
we went
yeah,
there.
that was brutal.
He really doesn't know how
Yeah,
to
he
make a
went there.
speech there.
And yeah, and so the whole thing, it's nailing the brinksmanship stuff with respect to that, and then well, to find out who dies at the end of thing, she in Doctor Who now, so I can see why she dead. But
Oh,
she
on the subject of that, sorry to cut you, Ricardo. So as it's a good thing to have you here, Tracy, right? Because you're a Doctor Who fan, right?
Yeah.
Forgive me, I haven't watched the show in years, right? But the actress who plays Cinta, right? Was she on the show when Andor season 1 started, or she came in after?
Was she on Doctor Who when it was happening in season 1?
Yeah.
There was an episode. Yeah, so here's the thing. There's an episode, short story. Yes, there's an episode where she's there, but her character is a different character. You know how Doctor Who loves these timey-wimey things.
Yeah.
Is a different character who is also a soldier. So
Right.
now he meets up this girl called Belinda after
Right.
Ruby is gone. He meets
Right.
up Belinda and he sees Belinda and he says, I know you because Belinda, that face was in a planetary war, like how much ever thousands of years into the future. So it's kind of like bringing back that whole Clara Oswald all over the place kind of
Right.
vibe. That's what you're getting with her. But yeah, she was there for like that one episode. And then we got word that she was coming to be a companion on season 2.
Okay, I see. Yeah, sorry about that, Ricardo. Yeah, move on.
Yeah, and so they do that whole aspect of it, and it's just spy work and spycraft stuff. Again, the brinksmanship of the whole thing is why it works really well, but there's a lot of dark undertones, and they're making it work. Like again, I'm really waiting for them, and I like the whole entire premise where each 3-episode sections is like a season unto itself. Like I get a feeling that look, they couldn't really make. I get a feeling they probably had more material to make Andor longer, but they say wrapping it up in a second season just to lead to Rogue One is just the smart call anyway. I to me, this stuff don't need to go that long. Like I love Andor season 1, but like yeah, I can imagine it getting real slow and kind of long in the tooth, all things considered. And so they're making it work for what it is, as it feels like a season. So they skip a year, then they do the 3 episodes, then they skip a year again. I was like, okay, that was a big surprise scene that at the end of, the beginning of episode 4. I'm like, oh, okay, there's what they're doing. So presumably we're gonna get another time skip again, right? And so on and so forth. And I can see that, right? And
another
so
year.
Exactly. And I dig in it for what it is. I like that these characters gonna how they bouncing off each other, where it going. It actually have me very engaged. And it's one of those rare cases where, like, one of the reasons I didn't care for Solo is because I know what's gonna happen to Han Solo, right? But this, I know what's gonna happen to Andor. I know the end point of it, and I'm still engaged, right? So that's just good storytelling. Like, it's just how to keep you engaged. You know, the how and the why is what matters more than just the end point. Meanwhile, Solo fall flat because like I didn't give a shit anyway, so it's like it's fine. And it's interesting how just good storytelling, how to just execute this really works. And yeah, this season just strong so far. I really want to see where they're going with it. You know, especially after this episode 6, there's that interesting cliffhanger, especially stuff with with what's her name, Rix, where she get revenge on somebody.
No, Bix. Yeah.
Bix, sorry, yeah. Where she get revenge on somebody. You find out how it was, and I was like, okay, that's a good little catharsis to make it work. The stuff with Gorman is really dark stuff. The Gorman people is basically Quebecois people. Like I don't know what accent that's supposed to be. Like this space Quebecois, right?
They're French. Sorry, forgive me. They're French. So here's the thing: it's French actors,
right.
and they
French
base it on. Yeah, so they base it on the French language, but like Star Warsified a little bit, and it is said that the actual actors themselves, all the French actors, were speaking the Gorman like language offset as well. So it sort of like in their head because it is French. In fact, hell, Gorman is. It's interesting to watch Gorman because Gorman is basically France before Nazis took over
Yes, the
Paris.
Vichy, yes, the
Yes.
Vichy thing, right? Exactly. And, but I
Yeah.
like what they're doing with it, where they have their own history of it, and you learn that a little a little Star Wars history, which is the Tarkin massacre happened. This is what the
Yeah.
Tarkin massacre had happened years prior. I thought it was two. They make it frame as if it's two separate events now, or like, oh, it
But,
is
but,
okay. And I'm like, all
but
right,
here's the
cool.
thing: you have the which is very cool about how they do this show. So you have the idea of like what Tarkin did in
Right,
terms of that. But there's also like different bits and pieces of Star Wars talk about the Gorman massacre. And the Gorman massacre takes place like about I think a year or 2 years, I will double check, like about 2 years before Yavin.
right,
So you already have the scene happening with what Tarkin did as Moff. And then now you're setting up a thing here where the entire planet and the people of this planet is about to get into a kind of a war, a kind of a massacre that will
right.
eventually
So,
lead Mon
but
Mothma to
this is
slay.
why, yeah, this is why the
Yeah.
whole thing's so insidious because they do this on two levels, right? One, the actual ultimate plan of what they want to do to the planet, but two,
Yes.
yeah, they want to like justify the violence, like so they egging them into a situation where they want to justify the
Hmm.
violence, and I like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's constant rage bait now. I know there's some real world scenarios that kind of happening right now,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, and so they're making like a workable conceit of it, and they're really nailing the whole yeah these guys are bad. Like they're really nailing that. Like it's not jokey or anything like that. You know, you could it's how seriously you want to take it or not, and you know, it's for adults or not. But I find it from emotionally just not pulling any punches, and that's why it's real working. That's why it
Hmm.
works. Like it really put in the gut punch stuff with you. You know, like again, Rick's she have the drug problem, and you know all these little small things. Like yeah, that makes sense. This character going through this and they're going through that. You overprotective of her. They have a clash, and all they're all bouncing off in interesting ways. And I really want to see how they're going to resolve all of this and they're speeding it up in a good way and making it work for what it is. But yeah, solid stuff so far. Solid first half. Really solid first half.
Right. So I don't want to spend too long, gushing over this show, right? But no lie, right? While I was recapping the first season and I took in the first 6 episodes of this new one, right? Two thoughts came to mind, right? One, would this show have worked if it wasn't part of the Star Wars universe and it was just like something brand new, like something that we've never seen before? Like some novelists just decided to write this, dystopian space opera about like a war going on, right? And you have like these Nazi people involved, right? Would it have worked just as well as how this show works, seeing that it is part of the Star Wars universe? That's one thing, right? Because while I'm watching, this season, the first half of this season and the one before, I am just amazed, right, that somebody just up and decided, here's what. We're gonna just tell a story that is grounded in reality, but it's within the world where, you know, we have Jabba the Hutt and C3PO and other characters, right? It's in the same world, or like what I just mentioned earlier with with Cad Bane and other characters like that. It's within the same world, right? And it fits. It doesn't feel out of place at all, right? Like something like that shouldn't work, and somehow it does. Somehow it actually does, right? That's what I said earlier. Because it takes itself seriously and it does it so well, you are forced to take it seriously as well. So you are invested in everything that goes on, right? Now, second thing, right? This goes into just this rollout as far as just these 2 seasons as a whole, right? Um, will people now go back to this show and be like, wow, if only it had another season, it maybe could have been, it could have been much better than it already is, right? It could have been one of those scenarios, right? But I do like that, similar to Loki, which also had 2 seasons, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this show somehow figures out a way to tell its story, hit the beats that it needs to hit, right? So I am hoping that by the end of the season, we wouldn't even have to worry about whether we need an extra season or not. If you want an extra season, you want a denouement, if you will, watch Rogue One. That's really what it is, right? So I can't say if an extra season tacked onto this would have made the show even better. But the point is, the show is still great, nonetheless. And yes, this season has kicked off and is going and has stopped at a great point, in my opinion. For one thing, boy, just the visuals, boy, the production design, cinematography, top notch though. And one thing I love though is how it taps into it taps into just like dystopian stuff, right? There's you see allusions to films like Brazil, right, or Blade Runner in particular, right? Just all these allusions to classic sci-fi films, and yet it doesn't feel like, oh, you're trying hard to be like Blade Runner. It's like, no, it's Star Wars. But we using the aesthetic of other shows to tell a Star Wars story, but it fits and it makes a lot of sense, right? The music, I forgot the composer's name. Well, I know you know it offhand, Tracy. Yeah,
it's a hold on, because it's a Brandon Roberts.
I think it's Brandon Roberts. I think so. Yeah,
because it was because originally it was
Nicholas Britell,
who was there.
Yeah.
Who was there in season 1, but they brought in Brandon Roberts in, and then of course, he amplified it a great deal more. Let's just put it that way. But Nicholas was there, and then Brandon. So
I thought that like Brandon is like. I like the fact that he's not trying to do Nicholas Britell, right? Yes, you will hear the familiar themes, but that's because the themes were already established, right? So you could add them to the show because that's what we want, right? Especially when it comes to the theme song, right? But I like how he just puts his own spin on what we would associate with a score for a Star Wars show, right? Because yes, you get the horn stuff, right? You get the violins, you get the strings, you get all that stuff, right? But the man will throw in EDM dread. He'll throw in like a little pop as well too. Like a little, he'll throw a little pop here or there, and it works, right? Especially
I don't know if it's the same guy from last season, but remember that great song they did when Andor was on the kind of beach planet where he got arrested?
Yes, I know what you talk about. Yeah.
Right. It's a great track, but
it's called Naimos.
What's it called?
Naimos, Naimos.
All right.
Great. That track was such a bang. And then this time they do a version of it with when we call she Mon Mothma kind of crash out a little bit now because she
yes.
like, oh shit, the wedding now. And like,
no, about that, right? So yes, as I said before, we'll trail spoilers here, there, not too much, right? Now it was kind of spoiled in terms of what to expect with that particular episode, right? That would be episode 2, right? Where basically you are just seeing the weight, boy, just crushing Mon Mothma's shoulders, because she's trying to legitimately set up funds so she could do she little campaign to bring on the Empire dread, and is at the cost of she daughter because she had to sell she off basically to this former, in quotes, thief, if you will. His son want to marry she, all that kind of stuff, right?
Mob boss.
Yeah, mob boss, right? Yeah. And it's all that stuff, is her alliance with Luton, is her cousin working alongside Luton, all these things, just crushing she down. So on YouTube, right, I just went up just one day and I saw 1 hour of Mon Mothma dancing. I say, okay, I'll put up in and then I go watch it yet until I see the episode, right? And I literally watched the episode last night I was recording this because I did like a little mini binge of it yesterday, right? And the context of where that moment comes and where basically she gets drunk and she's dancing to this EDM song is perfect, right? It's not just because she is emotionally crashing out here and she is just it's the whole thing like, you dance away the pain, but there's so much pain in it that you're going through that it just overwhelms us. And you could tell she's struggling emotionally, but when she goes in that dance, so it's like, you know what, fuck it, let me just go, right? What I love about that song in particular, right, is that you see it play out with the 3rd episode, right? I should say, sorry, not episode 2, episode 3. That's what happens, right? You see how with Bix and Andor as well too. Just the end moments of that, right? And Brandon had the goal to just let the song play throughout the final moments of that sequence, of that episode, dread. And I was like, yeah, that's what you had to do, because you are hearing this bright, upbeat EDM song, and you're seeing the characters, our favorite characters, at the lowest at this point, dread. I like this is simple, but it's brilliant, right? Is that sort of thought process that, these creators put into this show, right? Taking all these bold risks, right? And like, in a Star Wars show, what? Like what's going on here, right? So let's touch briefly on the moment, right? Yes. like I can understand people be like, oh my god, like why are we having this scene take place, right? But they went as far, right? Like, okay, like admittedly to me, right? And me to me, right? It's still within the TVPG route, right? But yes, what happens is that Bix is viciously attacked by this, let me just say, a tusty, this Imperial member, if you will, right? But yeah, it kind of borders on rape, right? Because he is like physically attacking her, right? But to the show's credit, right? I like that it was not done in an exploitative manner. Like for a majority of that moment, which is basically this fight scene, this dude was getting his ass washed, like he was getting bashed over the head repeatedly, right? Like, and yeah, minor nitpick, the dude could have pulled out the gun and do something, but he so disheveled, he's just like, oh, whoa, and he falling stuff, right? But if I would have argued about that scene if Bix was getting a lot of abuse, right? If she was getting a lot of licks, I would have been like, all right, yeah, or they're going a little too far with it, right? But I like that this adds to the catharsis that we see in episode 6, right? Because yeah, if you remember, she was tortured by this Imperial scientist, right?
Doctor.
Doctor, trying to get information. This device is strapped to she head and it sends out this noise, and she's it affects her, right? I just see how it affects her even when she's free from all that, right? Now, at that point in time, I was worried that she was just going to be the victim, Oh, I'm having PTSD, and but I'm glad that there were these few moments where she fought back, especially in that episode 3, right? But I can understand some people watch this and say Star Wars are going a little too far, right? Oddly enough, right? As I wrap up this part here quickly, right? What came to my mind, oddly enough, was Inglourious Bastards, because the way how the dude came to her was exactly how the guy who played Zemo, right? Who played Zemo in the MCU shows, right? He was in Inglourious Bastards. He played a similar guy, like a soldier. He watching this woman's like, hey, you're looking hot. I want to know, like, you have a man, and he moving at you like that now. And then when you keep getting rejected, he reacts violently, and that's the same thing that happened in Inglourious Bastards. And the way how the fight plays out is almost like that. So I kind of saw it as sort of like this weird callback to that film, right? Because yes, I mean, Inglourious Bastards also featured, scummy Nazis as well too, right? Who kind of presented as, hey, we human beings, and we just following orders too, but yeah, some of them on shit too, right? So I saw that allusion, right? But at least thankfully at the end of the day, yes, it was still within a TVPG box. But I can understand some people being kind of turned off by it. Even right down to, there's a moment where Big say, the man tried to rape me. And in my years of consuming Star Wars film content, I have never heard a character say the word rape in my life until I saw the episode. But mad props to them for saying, yes, we're going to do that, right? And it's not done in an exploitative way. Just really there to build tension, emotional tension, right? And you're right, Ricardo. You really see that with every single character, even right down to Andor as well, too. At first, I was not too big on the moment with him crash landing on this planet, and you had this sort of like this rebellion faction fight each other.
You get to see the feel. Yeah, you get to see the fail version of this kind of stuff.
That's right. Yes, that's what it is.
If you kind of lack of discipline, it could fall apart so quick.
Yeah, and it just ended up being this faction being split down the middle, and the fighting literally over for nothing. That's great. But at first I was like, why are they moving so shippage? But then they say, well, we lead her going, and we don't know if she dead or not. But yeah, you could tell that without a leader, they can't function. You see how that happens. But yeah, at first I was like, where is going? But then when you really start to see how they fall apart and how Cassin was able to fool them to escape, it's like, all right, yeah, that make a lot of sense, right?
It's very Lord of the Flies.
Yes, very Lord of the Flies, right? They trap on this planet, they can't trust each other, and they eventually want to kill each other out, right? That works, right? Luton, yes, Ricardo, yeah, he is still the best character in the show, Dread, because yeah, as he said when he talked to the snitch from who work in the Empire. Yeah, I willing to do whatever it takes, to win, Lonnie, that's the name. Yeah, I sacrifice you, it don't matter, At the end of the day, it's about victory. That's what it is, and you really see the conflict with that, like how that mindset of his conflicts with his movement, right? In particular, with his assistant, I forgot her name right now, right? Where she has to be making calls. oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name right now. Yeah, she had been making certain calls, like case in point with this particular art piece that have a bug in it, right? And she literally had to go in now while, Luton, Rel showed off as he usually does, right? And one thing I always love about him and Mon Mothma in particular, right, is how they play the whole, oh, you seen me? With all smiles and with my hands movement and look how I'm moving, right? But the second you turn your back, she would turn around and talk to somebody, hey, this is what really going on, and it's just the performative vibe of it, though. I love it. You really see it with Luton, right? But yeah, how his assistant had to come in and basically like do his job for him, I absolutely love, right? I love how they follow up on Cinta and Mon Mothma's cousin. I forgot her name right now. Vel, I think, right? Vel, I think it is, right?
Vel.
Yeah, where it ends with Cara like Cinta, Dre, but the kill she off. But I was like, oh man! But I love the moment where Vel call out the person who fired the shot. Though that's always say don't spoil anything, right? And Rel hammering it to him, Dre. What he do?
He wasn't supposed to have a blaster, you know.
Yeah,
First place,
and dude dropped the ball, Dre. It's like, and yeah, to be fair, the guy that he was talking to moved like an asshole. I get that, right? But dog, that was sloppy.
Yeah,
That was sloppy.
It wasn't supposed to have a blaster. She said that only she and think she should carry a blaster for this thing. And
Yeah.
just didn't listen to them. Yeah.
Yeah, boy. So at the end of the day, because I could talk more about character, this and that, right? Yeah, I just love where these characters are at, right? How conflicted they are. Where, especially the case of Andor, yeah, just kind of not knowing the direction in which you're going. It's like in his case, for example, like, yeah, I'm doing all this job, not knowing how I'm Gorman, and I'm supposed to play this guy, but I don't know what's going on, but you don't know what's going on, so I don't know if you know what's going on, so I like that. I like that people are just clouded in terms of their directions as far as where to go, right? They hell-bent on taking down their enemies, right? Whether it's the Empire or it's the Resistance, but they're still not sure. Even Cyril isn't sure, right? And boy, his relationship, boy, with Dara, boy, is fascinating there, but it's the kind of relationship that as a man, I am glad I am not in a toxic relationship like that, too. like dog. Like, listen, my respect to Dira, my respect to Shea, but dog, I can't be in a relationship with a girl like that. Sure, that's right down to that mean face she always rocking, boy. Nah, boy. But I love that moment with she and Cyril Moore. I was like, oh, she doing that? Like, what? To your in-law to be no dread, but it works, eh? But sorry, Tracy, you're saying?
No, that's fine. The thing for me is like it's like a car crash. It's cringy, but oh my god! If they don't eat up the scenes that they're in, like you want to know more about this. Somebody was talking about the idea of love relationships tend to be all very gooey and soft and glorious and that kind of stuff like that. This is very clinical. But to see that move from like him saving her at the end of season 1, when Perex went exploding,
went nuts, rioting and stuff,
So now them being a domestic, like they share an apartment and even organizing, and like her trying to smile, trying to figure out clothes and all this. The two of them, there's something about the two of them that just makes you be like, ugh, they should not be together. But also, let me see more of this. I don't know how it's going to play out because both of them are very keen on the Empire.
Yeah.
And she's very about the work, and he wants to ascend. So I don't know how because there's a line, a small spoiler, there's a line there where she says to him, I'm glad to see you so happy. And, I can already see the ship starting to break apart.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's going to be very interesting to see in the next arcs. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. So as a wrap up here, right? So I do like the resistance in Gorman, and I just like the fact that they're using this sort of full French accent as well too. I think that to me personally, I think that adds to the whole war espionage thing, right? Because I was watching that and I was thinking of some World War II war drama that involved like some resistance group, but they are locals and they speaking in their own dialect as opposed to English. I think that works as as well, right? Really tapping into that whole war element that the show draws very much from, right? Yes, it's light on action, but when there is action, they make it work, right, for the most part, right? But it's just the tension that builds. I just love how it's always like especially like with the end of these episode 3 and 6, right? How it's always done like with rhythmic editing as well too, right? Like where one character is going through one thing and then you see the cut back and forth. It absolutely works, right? Especially with the music and how it used there, it works as well, right? As I mentioned, Saw Gerrera, having his moment to shine as well too, right? Still the crazy mofo that he is, right? But I like how he's paired with I get the kid's name, right? But
Will something.
yeah, Will something.
Willman,
Willman, right? Yeah, and yeah, for those who forgot, he was the one who made the dirty bomb that blew up during the whole funeral procession for Marva, right? In case you forgot, right? So yeah, so I like that he is put in that position. Now, it's not a gripe per se, right? But the whole decision to have these these quarters of the season split up in terms of years, right, is challenging, right? Like at first when you see it like 1 year later, like I was like, I initially thought that what we're gonna see throughout this whole season is gonna be this 1 year play out, right? But they surprised me in episode 4 when it does a time skip, right? Now I could see some people nitpicking it and saying, yeah, you could explain this and how character A get here and, why Big's still depressed after a year, even though she with Andor and blah, 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 right? You could nitpick those stuff. But I think it's just more to get the story rolling until we reach the point where it's like, all right, Rogue One time. That's what it is, right? So it's a very risky move that the creators did. But I think that it paid off. Like, I really think it working so far, right? I'm really curious to see what we see with the last 2 years, right? Before, Rogue One takes place, right? But yeah, that being said, though, I am thoroughly impressed with this season here. And it is shaping up at this moment to be, a best of the year contender. Like, I could see it at the moment, kind of taking the number 1 spot. But that all depends on whether these last 6 episodes, really hit it home for me, right? I'm hoping that it does, right? But again, as I said before, I'm now wondering when we look back at the show, as we continue on to sing its praises, right? Because even though now people call it one of the best sci-fi shows out there, and I agree, right? I wholeheartedly agree it's one of the best ones, right? But in particular, again, and this is something that could be debatable for years to come, right? Is it great because it's within the world of Star Wars, or is it great because it's just telling a great story? I think it's just both. I think both those reasons are the reasons why, the show is great, right? But again, it's that 2-season run where I feel like years from now we'll look back and be like, boy, if you only got one more season, man, you know what I mean? If you just got one more, we could have been like, yeah, boy, this was it, right? But they're doing the Loki route, right? Where it's just 2 seasons and then it just ends. Which, I don't know. I guess for fans, you'll just be like, oh gosh, but one more season, man. I mean, whatever it is, right? I guess we'll see in due time. But for now, this second season and final season is off to a fantastic start. I can't be mad with any of this, right? So yes, to close things off, Tracy, your thoughts on this first half here, and you can get spoilery if you want to.
Okay. I'll start by addressing something you were saying there. I think, yes, it does work very well. I feel like it works very well on its own, but it works even better because it's Star Wars. Because we knew from there's always talk ever so often it comes back up of George having scripts and scripts and scripts and scripts and scripts and scripts of all different types of Star Wars. There was supposed to be something with an underground, underworld type Star Wars show with gangsters and all that kind of stuff. There was supposed to be some other type of Star Wars show. So he had a whole bunch of ideas. And then after the prequels and everything that happened there, everything just got shelved for the most part. I mean, you got your animated pieces, but you got stuff shelved. So now, I know there's still a whole bunch of Disney haters, but now with the advancement of Disney having their streaming service, and Filoni, who has always been we talk about a Padawan and Master. He literally was George's Padawan. He has the mind of George and can then now be able to say, this is where we want to go. And even Kathleen, who was the heir apparent in terms of an executive coming and helping to shape everything that is there, I feel like now we can actively open up more and more in Star Wars. One of the things that I'm looking at here in my notes is I really would like to have more EDM in Star Wars. I am 100% down for the orchestral pieces, but you see that Nemos build that they did there in the book of Boba Fett with the speed races. There's a kind of a poppy EDM kind of track that is played with that as well. That was brilliant. And then years ago, there was maybe about 10 years ago, there was an album called Star Wars Headspace that was like techno and that kind of vibe. And I was like, more of this, please, because it really does open up the world. Like there's even a track in episode 6 when they're going to Skulden's party, and the music that is played there
Oh
is
yeah.
so different.
That's
And
the
I'm
moment
like,
where Mon Mothma and her husband going in. Yes, that
yes,
sounds great. I love
yes.
that. Yeah.
It's kind of newsy, but very bougie. But at the same point in time, and the only thing that it brought me close to was that gambling planet in the Last Jedi. But
Oh
that
yeah.
doesn't even like come like it's close, but it's still no cigar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if
So I need
if I
more
could just throw in
EDM.
one more, if I could just throw in one other song, right? There's a
Mhm.
moment where I think it's in episode 5 or I think it is where we're in it's Cyril's apartment, right? This is right. I
Yeah,
think this is where they were getting ready for Cyril's mother to come in,
his
and they're
mom.
playing this
Mhm.
great like jazz song, like some Sunday morning, vibes there. And I was
Yeah,
like, I need this
yeah.
song in my life. I love that song. Yeah.
It's brilliant, and even so, right there, we talk about like the actual the work that is done there in terms of the acting and the storytelling, but even the idea of expanding the types of music in the galaxy, that is something that shows like Andor is able to do, and it doesn't feel like if it's a regurgitation. So that is something that I pretty much dig. I go back to the idea of France in Star Wars, and I mean, I am loving the idea of France in Star Wars for all intents and purposes because it's so weird. We know that Star Wars as a whole is very much about the space Nazis fighting the space Nazis, but when you have a planet like Gorman and you see what's going on, and you remember little things about, like I was saying, the idea of Paris is about to be occupied under the Nazis, the sort of what was leading up to all of that, it really does have a very real world sensibility about that, and I very much adore that. um, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but one of the very cool things about that whole Lost Boys, Lord of the Flies, episode 1 and 2, where he was crash landing on the planet, you notice when he was flying out, there's a pillar that he sees. That planet is Yavin 4.
Okay.
So that is a planet that,
Yeah,
that
in
they're going to
episode
be
4, yeah.
on for both Rogue One and A New Hope. That's
Right.
where the Rebel base is going to be. So it's really interesting to have this random bunch of cool, whatever they are, just there, unorganized and very helter skelter. And that's going to be the place that they're going to need to run to. So that's going to be something. Watching this whole thing play out, it also me explains why Mon was so close to Leia, because like Leia is the daughter that she didn't really have. Because even in season one,
They changed the actor for Bail Organa, John.
yes,
It's Benjamin
what,
Bratt, John.
Yes, that caught me
That
by
came out
surprise.
there.
Cause I was wondering, is that a young? Is that like
I thought
Leah's
Jimmy Smith.
father young or something like that? I was like,
No,
but then I saw Benjamin Bratt's name. I was like, oh, okay.
yeah, they
That's
changed the
not
actor.
new. So since you brought that up, because I was going to talk about that a little lower, but since you brought that up, here's my thing. That has opened up a beautiful door now. I don't necessarily see. I mean, and I live online, but I haven't seen a lot of backlash, so to speak, for it. But what that does is that you are now allowed the possibility of, if that worked here, then we can do recasting without the uncanny valley. Like for years, people have been fan casting the idea of Sebastian Stan can very well be a young,
Something they should have
middle-aged,
do anyway.
young,
A young Luke, yeah.
young Luke. Okay, so
That'll be
I
interesting.
accept. I accept. Listen, I totally accept the idea of technology for the time that you have it and for the story that you want to tell it. So like having the digital presence on an actor who sounds like Tarkin, but you put Tarkin's face over it. Yes, it looks very, very video gamey, but I was still able to get past it because I understood Tarkin was there and Tarkin was being Tarkin. But now you actually open the door because of scheduling conflicts and stuff that Jimmy Smith had. You bring in Benjamin Bratt, you still get the feel of what Senator Beale would be like. And yes, you have all these from the prequels and Obi-Wan and everything else where you have Jimmy Smith, but it opens up the door now. So when you have shows, you have books like, and I go back to Bloodlines, which shows a middle-aged to an older Leia trying to figure out, like what is going to be her next move, and the First Order is the seeds of the First Order is now starting to come. You can bring in a person like, and I'm just calling her name here because that was her friend. You can bring in a Meryl Streep and say, Meryl, you were friends with Carrie. You can take the mantle now and move Leia forward in terms of stories that happened before she died, before Leia herself died in the last one. So that opens up brilliantly. What I do like as well in terms of, I started to kind of like name the arcs. So for me, arc one is about consequence, that whole wedding and what I call the Lost Boys of Yavin 4. Arc two, I call it commitment, or you could maybe even call it communication. The idea of Saw and his team and Dedra and Cyril and the ISB and how they are plotting and that kind of stuff. I wait to see what Arc 3 would be like, but my guess is since we're getting closer to it, it'll be about control, because now you will have to deal with the Gorman massacre. Now you will have Mon Mothma actually standing up in the Senate and calling Palpatine a monster. These are things where you're going to have a measure of control over the galaxy on a different level. So that should be interesting. I'm also very curious to see like whether Luthen and Claire feel like familial. So I'm wondering if at the end of it you'll hear that was her uncle or something along those lines. It feels more than just employer-employee kind of approach. It feels like they were family or some distant relative or something of the sort. So we'll see where that goes. Generally speaking, I'm 100% down in terms of what Andor has provided. I'm very much liking um, the slow meal that we get. So you don't have to. It's not a fast food kind of something. The way that it's allowed to breathe and the way that you actually get to focus on certain characters and where they're going. Because we know when we reach to Rogue One, one, we know how Rogue One ends. But also, it does set up in a very strange way that if a character doesn't die, what could be the tie-in? If Bix doesn't die, which I think she probably might, but if Bix doesn't die at the end of Andor, what is her reaction when she finds out that that Cassian is dead?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. But of course,
I will be genuinely happy if Bix survivor. I'll be happy. I will be happy.
I think there's two people who I think are not going to probably make it. The more I think about it, it's Bix and Luthen. I don't, especially seeing, you see that whole thing with Claire's hand bleeding by the Codex in episode 3 when she was trying to take out.
When she's trying to unscrew anything. Yeah.
No, well, six, not 3. 6.
Six. Yeah, sorry. With that, I can see now, and I have in the back of my mind that Skulldun is playing a bit of a long game. Like, I feel like Skulldun already knows that one of the artifacts was bugged and was doing a whole thing to catch whoever it was, because he's not dumb. So I feel those two are probably going to die. I wait to see whether Perrin, that's Mon Mothma's husband, whether Perrin makes it, whether he turns out to be an actual ally for her to help her escape, because you never really hear. In all my years in the little books and stuff that I might have read and all the other stuff, I've never really heard of Perrin. I've never really heard of the daughter and the Chandrilan marriage act that they have and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be really something to see where they lie, and if at the end Perrin becomes her most trusted ally coming on towards the end. But until we get that, all of this is just speculation, and I am very much in love with it. And I once again thank Gareth Edwards. As much as Tony is doing brilliantly. Tony Gilroy has done absolutely brilliantly with this series. But I thank Gareth Edwards for paving the road that we are on in terms of what was presented in Rogue One, Blue Milk et al., leading us now to be able to go back and do this story proper.
Right.